Hi everybody, my name is Emmy Anderson. I am the Network Coordinator for the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance. I am very excited to have you all here today. This is our final day for our 7th annual Principle 6 conference. We have had a great conference so far, and we have another great afternoon in store for you today. A quick agenda: we are going to have a nice panel discussion shortly to let you know how we as co-ops can interact with the media in a way to lift up our co-ops and promote them. We have 3 well-known Maine journalists with us today and a wonderful moderator. After that, we are going to round off at about 2:50 and have a 10-minute break. Come back at 3 o'clock for another in-depth discussion around how we can build communication strategies to more effectively advance our mutual cooperative advocacy efforts in Maine. Before we get started, let me share my screen. I would like to highlight our sponsors. These sponsors made this year's conference possible. Our Mondragon level sponsors are Cooperative Development Institute, the Portland Food Co-op, Cabot Creamery Cooperative, InSource Renewables, Democracy at Work Institute, the Belfast Co-op, Columinate, Rock USA, and our Grange level sponsors are Blue Hill Co-op, Seaport Credit Union, the Cooperative Fund of New England, Rising Tide Co-op, Fedco Seeds, Town and Country Federal Credit Union, and Maine Harvest Federal Credit Union. Our Knights of Labor level sponsors are National Co-op Grocers. Our Cooperator level sponsors are Maine AFL-CIO and the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, Rock City Coffee, Community Credit Union, Fair Share Food Co-op, and the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Now, I'm going to guide you through these conference guidelines really quickly. I know most of you have heard them already, but here we go. Keep yourself muted during presentations, and when others are talking, keep your video on if you can, because it's wonderful to see your faces. Please display your name, pronouns, and organization on your video if you're able to do so. So that others know who you are and can contact you in the chat if they want to network with you. Use the chat to communicate with our tech support. Catherine, Bessie, and Jasmine Jacobs is helping us again today. Find them on the chat. And if you need other support today, email me at emmy@maine.coop. For our workshops today, listen when others are talking. Please do not interrupt presenters or fellow cooperators unless asked to do so. Be understanding. Not all of us come into this space on equal terms. Be curious. Ask lots of questions in our Q&A sessions. Be aware of time. Come back from break on time and try to be concise with your contributions and questions. And now I would like to introduce my colleague, Doug Clopp, who is the Director of Communications and Development at the Cooperative Development Institute. He is also a he's also a steering committee member of the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance and has a couple of decades, I believe, of experience in working with nonprofits in advocacy, both in Maine and nationally. Very excited to have Doug here today. He's going to be moderating our first panel, as well as co-present our very last session of this conference. So excited to have you here, Doug, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day with you.
Thanks, Emmy. So am I. So I'd first like to welcome the journalists who are joining us today. And I'm going to start with Maureen Milliken, who's the senior business reporter for MainBiz. Maureen, if you could wave your hand, that'd be great. I'd like to introduce you to Chris Busby, editor of the Mainer. Chris. And Fred Bever, news reporter and producer at Maine Public. It's nice to actually put a face to a voice, Fred.
I noticed that we're all wearing, all the Maine journalists here are wearing plaid.
It's kind of a in the cooperative movement, the flannel shirt is definitely the dress code, and certainly for folks in Maine. There have been times when like Rob and Jonah had the exact same flannel shirt on. So thanks for that. This session is called Interacting with the Media. And the question that we have is, how can Maine's cooperative community better interact with the media to advance cooperative development in Maine? So it's going to be an interactive session. I'm going to pose some questions to the journalists, and we're going to let them answer. And a little later on, we're going to go into some breakout sessions where you're going to be randomly assigned to one of these three esteemed journalists. And during that breakout session, learning what you have from the beginning here, I'm going to have each of you, or a couple of you in the breakout sessions, think about a great story about your co-op that you'd like told, and you're going to pitch it to the journalists. And we're going to get some feedback in the breakout sessions about, yeah, that is a story I'd like to cover. Or actually, no, you know what? That's just not really going to rise to the level of my editor's interest and approval. So that's kind of how this is going to roll. We know that Maine's cooperatives are full of great stories about empowerment, self-determination, self-reliance, and democratic decision-making across multiple sectors of our economy. Yet many people in Maine still are not aware of the cooperative model and how essential it can be in securing local control of our food systems, securing affordable housing, or preserving our small business economy through employee ownership. How can we change that? One way is to work with members of Maine's media to tell our stories and share our successes. In this session, we're going to learn about what are the most effective ways to do that. Each one of these journalists represents an outlet that has covered cooperative development and cooperatives in Maine. And we want to hear about, what makes a good story that's deserving of coverage? What's the best way to engage a reporter or an editor? What makes a good press release and what doesn't? And Fred will tell you straight up that mine are too long. What are the do's and don'ts? What are more importantly, the don'ts that we need to pay attention to? And how can we, the cooperative community, be more effective in lifting up our stories in Maine's media so that more Mainers can understand the work that we do and hopefully get involved in it. So with that, I am going to ask the first question to this panel. And the order of response is going to be Maureen, and Fred, then Chris. So as I just said, Maine has a really vibrant cooperative ecosystem. Each of your outlets has covered cooperatives and cooperative development in Maine in the past. What is it that makes cooperative development and its community impact a good story to cover? What is it that gets the attention of your editors? And we're going to start with Maureen.
Hi, thanks for having me. One thing that all of these answers, or all of the questions, I think today, the answers come from a place where all news organizations now are way understaffed and overworked. And I don't say that in a whiny way, but just we have all sorts of stuff coming at us. So the number one thing, no matter what the news organization is to understand who you're pitching to and what type of story they write, they publish. Because, for instance, MainBiz, where I work, is a business-to-business publication, and we cover things a little different from newspapers, and it would help to look and see what type of stories we write and how we cover them. And that said, in general, we look for how things fit into the greater context of the business community, how they're addressing issues or trends that are happening right now, and if they create jobs, it's always a plus with us. And we have a print publication that comes out every 2 weeks that's like our flagship publication, where we do more in-depth feature stories. And at the beginning of the year, I did a story about the co-op, the residential co-op. Sorry, my brain isn't working, but the people who live in mobile home parks, buying the parks. The way that came to me as a story was I had seen way back in October the Grow Smart Awards that Charter Oaks had won a Smart Growth Award. And I said, that would be a good story. But things being what they are, I never got around to it until, I can't remember when it was, a couple months later, Camden Mobile Home Park, the residents there bought the park, and I said, okay, now here's two. What's the bigger picture? And I did a story, I think for one of the January issues of MainBiz, that looked at those two things as the news hooks, but the bigger picture of this trend. And well, in our daily report, which comes out Monday through Friday at noon, we have 7 stories, and we would possibly do a smaller story about one of those things happening. What we generally look for, particularly for our print publication, is a bigger picture. How does this thing that's happening right now fit into the bigger picture in the business world? And that's I'll give somebody else a chance to talk.
Thanks, Maureen. So Fred, Maine Public has covered cooperative development. They've covered New Ridge Cooperative Farm. They've covered East Ken. What is it that piques Maine Public's interest to actually get one of our stories on air?
Well, the first thing, just to echo a couple of things Maureen just said, is before you come to us, you need to know us and you need to do your research. You need to see what exactly we have covered in the past that's on your storylines, what we haven't, and what the various forums are that we have. Because public radio, there's many different ways to present information there. There's in our online publication, there's our daily news stories, there are our talk shows. And so there's all our different types of presentations. And so you want to, first of all, figure out what was the last time we did something that was like your story. And then if it was a week ago, you might wait a while, but then you want to consider which is the best of those forums for it. Usually right now, digital is just kind of an echo of what's happening in our talk shows and in our news stories. Timing is important and who you pitch to is important. Like right now, it's not a great time to pitch to us. We've got 5 reporters covering the entire state in the midst of a pandemic and political convulsion. So after the election is going to be a better time to get noticed. But then what the story is about, similar to what Maureen is saying, we're looking for stories that have, we're looking for subjects who personify identifiable trends. What we're about is voices and sound, right? We're radio first, we're audio first. And so, but we're statewide. So we need to be telling stories that someone in Millinocket and someone in York would have, reasonably equal interest in a story. And so trends are important for getting stuff through our editors, but we want charismatic figures who personify the story. We want to be able to set scenes and bring our listeners into that seat right next to them to tell that story. And so in Maine, there's an ongoing story to be told about cooperative development, which is about succession. When you have an aging population and you have, small business owners all over the state trying to figure out how to set up the next generation, that's a story that pretty much anybody in Maine can relate to. So then we need to find the personalities. And then when you're pitching to us, you need to think about sound. We have a general audience. We're trying to put them in the scene. And so we've got a trend, we've got a personality. Now, how do we really bring the story to life? Oh, there's a chainsaw going where, a cooperative logging group is cutting down trees, or where, a new trailer is being put in, or coffee is being made in Stonington. Anything that's got an AURAL, oral capacity quality, we like that. That helps in your pitch to us. So I think those are the basics I could give you. We're looking for detailed stories that demonstrate a larger trend.
Thanks, Fred. So I think when it comes to, your interest in finding dynamic or charismatic personalities, I think Rob Brown could probably help you with that. I'm sure he's got a few on his mind. So thanks. Chris, what is it for the Mainer? You've done a whole series, about 2 years ago. You ran a series of stories, like full-length feature stories on affordable housing, on cooperative food systems, the cooperative movement overall. And I know from some of that work, it piqued an interest to actually convert to a cooperative. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Mainer, when we transitioned from the Bollard into Mainer, we did become what's called a multi-stakeholder worker cooperative. So our employees are one class of owners, and then our dozen or so regular contributors are also owners, just in a different form, as more like producers might contribute to a business. Doug, we did that series a couple of years ago. We kind of took a broad look at all residential co-ops, at worker-owned co-ops, consumer co-ops, like the Portland Food Co-op. I was actually getting to ESOPs, and then I kind of lost interest because they just weren't really strong enough as a subject, but it's something we might revisit at some point. So I think at this point in Mainer's coverage of co-ops, we're interested in doing profiles of co-ops. We're totally open to stories that just feature, hey, we're a co-op. For us, it's been the same limitation that my colleagues have mentioned in terms of staffing and pandemic and so forth. But that being said, for us, just again, the fact that you are a co-op, we feel is newsworthy. Being a co-op, it's certainly part of our mission to promote other co-ops, and so we fully intend to be doing that throughout the years. And we consider it newsworthy anytime a new co-op is starting up, or if there's an existing co-op that's doing something new or interesting. That's great. We do come out only monthly in print, but we also do stories on our website, mainernews.com, throughout the month. And I'm fully confident we'll be in a position to do more of these sorts of stories. If not later this year, we're already kind of working on our November issue, but certainly in 2021. We just recently did a piece on the New Roots Farm Cooperative in Isuken. I believe that was in our August issue. You're welcome to take a look at any of those stories on our website if you're curious in terms of how we cover these things. And I would say the one last thing is that Mainer, when we do these stories, we definitely, we're not going to be entirely like promotional about it per se. Like if there are things about your co-op that aren't going well, or there are struggles or something like that, it's important to us that, those are also part of the story. So if you're coming to us, don't expect that it's just going to be, a fluff piece. I think in general, all the stories we've done are pretty positive. But we'll point out, the struggles of a co-op or things that aren't quite working right. So, you should be prepared and okay with the idea that your co-op will kind of appear warts and all. But that being said, for the most part, these stories are certainly very positive. And I think when we have covered areas where co-ops have struggled, we always make a point of speaking with the person involved in the co-op in terms of how they're trying to overcome those problems. So that's kind of our approach in a nutshell. And I am the editor of the publication, so I make those decisions myself.
I'd just like to jump in here. It's interesting the different what approaches that the type of organization can have. So I've many times tried to pitch a story that's just about a co-op because it's a co-op. I remember I was trying to get my editor to give me the go-ahead to go profile the Stonington co-ops. And she wouldn't bite, and she wouldn't bite. And so then I think through conversations with me, Doug instead started pitching co-ops as a thing to our talk show. And a very successful Maine calling, hour-long call-in show on co-ops and the cooperative movement in Maine came out of that. And so there was a better forum for getting exposure through Maine Public Radio than just the sheer existence of a co-op. Now, when something new was happening, they're getting up and running. Like, I don't think I was in town even when the Stonington Co-op was starting. I was out of state. I think if it's just getting up and running, that might have been a more successful pitch. The New Roots Cooperative, that's on an interesting trend that our editors are gonna bite at, and I think they did, which is when you have new Mainers, all of the interesting things that happen, both conflict and success with new Mainers. That's a story that our editors are going to be attracted to. But just because I think it's great just that a co-op exists, but as the news value of just that fact is lower for us than it is for Mainer.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, editors are a different breed than journalists. And that experience with pitching for me, with you, pitching that story, for me, because I'm very passionate about this work, I'm like, come on, it's a story. And it's a great one. But as Fred said, the Maine Public newsroom and they obviously know each other. And I think it was Keith Shortall that we worked with to put together that piece on Maine calling. Sue Patno from the Rocks up in the Mid-Coast was on that panel, as was Rob. And we actually got through something that's been important to me was to really engage the credit unions. And Dave Libby, the CEO and president of Town and Country, joined that panel. And, at the end, I talked to your producer, I think it was Cindy Hahn, and she said, that, they couldn't accommodate the people who called in. They just couldn't get enough people on air. There were so many people stacked up. And it was a real lesson for me, even as Emmy said, after decades and decades and decades of doing this work, that really paying attention to the right format for your story. So it wasn't one that the editors wanted to cover there, but Maine Calling really picked it up, and it was a really wonderful experience, Fred. So thank Maine Public for that. Milliken, so what we've heard, like Maureen said earlier in this section, to this question, that for MainBiz, it really needs to be a story that and I think Fred said it too, that with a statewide outlet, it needs to be a story that anyone across the state of Maine can hear or read or see and connect it to themselves and their community. So that's something also to keep in mind as we engage with the media. My second question, because I think some of it might have been a little redundant and may have already been answered by now, but let's say you're someone who's participating in this panel, and Fred touched on this a little bit earlier, and you're really jazzed about something that your co-op is doing. You've never really kind of reached out and pitched a reporter before, but you're in Lewiston and you want to, engage the Lewiston Sun Journal. We've heard about timing. We've heard about kind of know your journalist or know your outlet, right? There's a rhythm to everything. But if someone who's not a communications professional or isn't a press secretary or a public, information officer, someone who's a member of a board of a co-op in Maine and they want to contact you, how's the best way to engage you? What's the best time to get a press release into your newsroom? What's the best time of the day to do a press conference if you're actually trying to turn out the press? So that's the question I'm going to actually pivot to. Chris, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things you do want to think about is, who am I trying to reach with this story? Is it a national audience? If you're involved in a business in Maine, for example, that has some tourism component, a story in the New York Times or the Globe or CNN is going to be great for you. But if you're selling hammers and nails in a small town, you definitely want to concentrate on media that covers your area. I mean, in that case, something like Maine Public, as Fred was saying, might be just too big. So you just want to go to your hometown paper and talk to them. In terms of the timing of things, I mean, we're a monthly magazine, so, things aren't that time sensitive for us. So in terms of like time of day or day, I don't think there's any distinction as far as that's concerned. I would encourage people to just kind of be yourself and be personable when you're, trying to communicate with members of the press. I don't think you should get hung up on, is my press release in the perfect format or, these kind of details. It's not something that, at least from speaking personally, that I really notice. What I do notice definitely is that if you personalize your communication, and email is a great way to communicate with journalists these days, just in terms of timing. But if you do personalize it, you're saying, hey, Chris, how are you? Something that's different than, for immediate release and it just going out to like 50 people. I pass by those things all the time. And sometimes I think I even miss good stuff because it just, it's not grabbing me. It's something as simple as, hey, Chris, my name's Joe and I live in Scarborough. Immediately I'm reading that. It's just the human connection. And, when I read that email, I'm not, hung up on the format of it or how it looks or any of that. I'm looking for some basic information about, what's going on. In terms of, if the question is about timing and approach, I'd say be personable, be informal, don't get hung up on details and things, at least as far as our publication is concerned. And, I think in general, don't let that stuff hinder you. Go ahead and just make the first step of reaching out, without having to do a ton of research necessarily. But I'd also lastly point out that, as some others have said, media in general they want the story to themselves. They don't want to be doing the same story that everyone else has covered. So be conscious of that. Like, you really want to kind of pitch your best potential media first and kind of give them, in a sense, an exclusive, I think, on something like that could be helpful. There are some exceptions to that for sure. If, you've got a big event you've got to tell everyone about or something like that. But keep in mind that, journalists are just people too, and they're happy in most cases, although they're busy, to be reached out to just on a personal level.
Thanks, Chris. Maureen, for MainBiz, like, what's the best way for someone to kind of contact you? And as Chris said, you're really busy, you're understaffed, things are flying at you like crazy from all over the state. What's the best way to engage with a reporter at MainBiz?
Well, first, I just want to address something, Doug, that you said in the last question, where you said that editors are different from journalists, and I just like to point out that editors are journalists who often have to make big journalistic decisions that reporters may not want made. So, having been an editor for more than 20 years at daily newspapers, I just wanted to, but that said, like Maine Public, MainBiz has 3 reporters for the entire state. We're inundated with email, yet email is the best way to reach me. Especially working at home, I don't like giving out my home phone number because I like to work. I know this sounds like anti-journalist, but I like to work business hours because I have other things going on in my life. And I don't want people calling me at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to pitch a story when I want to spend 2 days not thinking about work. So, but that's me. When you send an email, and we can probably get more into this when we talk about press releases, but in the subject line, don't put like good story for you or press release. Put something specific that will let me know, when I'm getting hundreds of emails a day from people, why I want to open it. and don't, having put some generic subject line, don't then in the email say, here's a good story for you, please read the attachment. Because if I have to take that third step to read an attachment to find out who you are and what the story is, I probably won't, because I just don't have the time. So however you approach it, get what the story, you don't have to do a whole long thing, but just, even if it's like a story about a new co-op in Lewiston would be better than press release. It's best to target individual reporters who you think would be interested in doing your story, who may have done previous stories. As Fred said, if we did a story about a new co-op last week, we probably won't do one this week. But if you have some bigger picture idea, or if you see we haven't done an article like this in a while, it's a good thing to reach out. It's best to, even though editors are journalists, it's best to find a reporter who does the kind of story you like, whether it's a local reporter at your newspaper, or if you think it's something MainBiz would be interested in, and email that reporter directly. You can find our email address by clicking on our name at the bottom of our stories, because as many emails as I get, my editor gets probably twice as many, and he isn't as interested in specific stories. At MainBiz, we pretty much decide, we reporters pretty much decide what we're going to write stories on. As long as they're decent stories, we don't get a lot of pushback. So, and timing wise, don't email a reporter, I would say in almost any instance, the day before something is going to happen. Let us know as early as possible. Don't be coy. There's nothing worse than getting well, there are a lot of things worse, but one of my peeves is getting a news release that says, we're going to have a press conference about some big important thing on Thursday. And it doesn't say what the thing's going to be. Because I don't need coyness. I want to know whether it's worth my while to cover it. I would suggest not doing a press conference unless you know you're going to get people to come to it. And MainBiz is different from newspapers. We publish digitally once a day at noon, where newspapers are publishing constantly throughout the day. So if something's going to happen at 1 o'clock, I know everybody else is going to have it 24 hours or 23 hours before I'm going to be able to publish it. So I'm not going to jump right on it, but it's best to find out if you want something in a particular publication, to talk to a reporter and find out what timing works for them, and reporters are willing to work with you. And just one final thing on the reaching out thing, things are crazy now, but it's also a good idea to find out, and Doug did this with me last year, find out from a reporter, hey, can we sit down and have a coffee and just talk about the kind of stories you're interested in and how I can get my stories to you. And as busy as we are, when somebody says that to me, I try. Sometimes it takes a month or two to make it happen, but because lots of times a reporter will see stories just talking to you for a while about what you have going on that you don't necessarily see as stories. You're in more of a vacuum and we're seeing a big picture. So that's something to try. People may say no, but I personally, if I have an opportunity to do it, try to get it done.
Thanks. And we did have a lovely lunch in Brunswick that day. And it was really nice for me to meet Maureen in person. And it really, was educational to me. As I was
have had a lot. People saying it's nice to meet me, so I appreciate that.
And it also, for me, helped me get to know, again, who Maureen is, the things that she's interested in, the things that MainBiz is interested in. And, I think that there's an important thing here too that we haven't touched on is trust. And, I have learned on both sides of my work that the most important piece in all of the work you do with media is trust. Your story has to be factual. You don't make stuff up. And sometimes you need to talk to a reporter and say, you know, this is off the record. And let's really, you know, kind of do a deep dive there. But there's a trust factor that I think is also important to build up. And so that when I contact one of these journalists, they know me. They know that I'm not selling them a bill of goods, that, you know, the things that I'm discussing with them are real and factual, and that there's a bit of a, you know, kind of a trust bond that goes both ways. And that's something that I've learned. Fred, with this, is there anything that you would like to add just about how someone, you know, who gets your attention and how do they get that?
Well, just on a pragmatic level, you know, don't try to contact any of us with an email after 3 p.m. Because we have deadlines breathing down our neck and we need to produce stories for our 5:30 slot. And so we're just not going to see it. So, you know, the way the day flows for many of us is, you know, you start your day just by pulling together what your day is going to look like. And then maybe between 10 a.m. and 11:30, there's a window when you can sort of start spending a little time to see what's coming across the transom for possible future stories. So, you know, we're not very event driven in terms of our stories, and except when it's like, you know, union calls meeting to bash Collins for using them in television ad. You know, that's something we'll go do a quick hit on because it's got, you know, it's got currency in the most important story of the day. But the kinds of stories that are, you know, more magazine-y, which I think your stories are, that's, you know, that's going to have a longer horizon. And, you know, we generally do not go for, you know, such and such gets a big batch of money. When you see us doing those stories, you know that it's a really slow news day.
Well, I'm hoping you have a slow news day next Thursday because I'm doing all these things that you're telling me not to do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Alphon Foundation just dropped a whole pile of money on a bunch of institutions, and that got some coverage, but not major coverage from us. It was not the focus of our days, even though it was hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not the dollars that really matter to us, it's the stories behind them.
Right.
So, you know, a check presentation ceremony doesn't do that much. When you're writing your emails, I mean, I totally second and third what Chris and Maureen were saying about a little bit of personalization goes a long way. And, you know, I want to hear the nut of your story. I want to hear the essential components, but don't start writing the story for me. I don't have time for it. Plus, that's the fun in it for me, is figuring out what the story really is and how to tell it in the best way that suits our audience. So I don't need you to give me a short story. I need you to give me a few facts that are, like, you know, really key, and a couple of ideas about who the types of people or even individuals you have for me to talk to. Or, you know, if you can get me in a room where something's happening, then, you know, a planning session for a construction site and then heading out to the construction site, something. That's fun for radio. So, you know, but between 3 and 5 p.m., don't send an email.
Just don't even bother you, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to just introduce another question here. We're kind of moving along pretty quickly. I'm just curious about how journalists interact kind of with social media, be it Facebook or Twitter. You know, is Twitter an effective way to, you know, if we follow you on Twitter or we tweet at you on Twitter, does it have any relevance or is it annoying?
Well, I'll speak to the fact that I think, you know, it can be very overwhelming to have all these means of communication, you know, between email and Twitter and Facebook. And, you know, I'll get messages on social media platforms that, you know, I never even see. I think coming at it from someone trying to pitch a story, what you could do is take a look at, so you've already identified the reporter or editor that you're trying to reach. Take a look at whether they post a lot on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram. If they do, then you know they're very active on that platform. If they rarely post on there, or it seems like just like pro forma stuff, chances are they're not really clued into it. I think email is still certainly the best way to reach people. Be wary of getting lost as just, again, just another of like now half a dozen or 8 or 9 channels of communication that are open to people. But, you know, I think you could, if you wanted, with a little bit of research, get a sense of what means of communication the particular reporter or editor that you're trying to reach tends to be most active on.
And
Maureen?
can I add too? I'm fairly active on Twitter, but it's not a MainBiz reporter account. It's my personal Twitter account. And while I do share MainBiz things on there, if you want to pitch a story to me, email me at MainBiz, because that's where I'm going to see my MainBiz stuff. Like Chris, you know, social media can be overwhelming. I have many siblings who are constantly saying, didn't you know about blah, blah, blah? I put it on Facebook. And I'm like, well, I'm not on Facebook 24 hours a day. I may post something, but I'm just posting stuff. I'm not reading other people's stuff. So if I would say, despite the dozens of social media ways to get a hold of somebody, the very, very best way to reach a reporter is to email them at their professional journalist email address. And that goes for phone calls too. I don't answer my phone. I get spam calls constantly. I literally don't answer my cell phone. I have a landline because my cell service isn't good where I live. If I don't know the person who calls my landline, I don't answer that either. And I think being pitched a story on my personal landline would annoy me. So I would say, and while that's just me, I would say emailing a reporter at their professional email address is the #1 best and in most ways only way to pitch a story, unless you run into them in Hannaford and want to pitch them there, which might work.
All right, Fred, social media for you, Twitter, Facebook, have you ever found anything with people effective with you? Like, oh, wow, thanks for tweeting that to me. What's social media like for you as a journalist?
For me, it's a research tool. You know, I want to see what Crash Berry of Mainer is discovering in his forays into the field. But other than that, it's not a way to reach out to me. I'll troll it to see if I can get story ideas, but I don't use it as a means of communication with sources, really.
Thank you.
But I'm kind of a dinosaur, and you know, we do have a whole social media team, which is one person, but you would need to talk to them. And one thing I do want to be sure that we consider as these conversations go on is that television is a different beast. It's an important one to think about when you're thinking, oh, you know, we just got $1 million. How can we turn that into a quick piece that ever hungry television reporters might want to do? If we can set something up for them that'll take them a half hour, get in there, they talk to someone who's going to be helped by this grant and someone else who can envision what it's going to do for the future, and boom, that might work for a television reporter, even if you give it to them that morning in a way that it might really not have a lot of appeal to print or print adjacent reporters like radio. So just one thing to keep in mind through these conversations, that there's a bunch of different legs, not just social media and print and radio, but television.
Great, thanks. So this third question is, you know, for everybody. The world got turned upside down this year in February. Governor Mills ordered a state lockdown for Maine to shelter in place if you could, you know, which really disrupted, you know, co-ops around the state. on our side, our revenue streams, pretty much everything. I mean, the whole world got turned upside down. How has COVID-19 pandemic affected your ability as journalists to cover stories? What's changed? And, when you couldn't get out in the field, or even now with the precautions that we have to take with social distancing and masks and hand sanitizers, I'm just really curious to learn how it's changed for you in the media, trying to get those personal stories and to develop those connections. And Fred, it looks like you're up on this one to start first.
It stinks. It's incredibly limiting. And, a lot of story ideas just come from getting out there and mingling in various contexts, and that's just not happening. And so that's kind of dispiriting. On the other side, it's an incredible moment to be a reporter. This is a wild historical moment. And so to live in interesting times and be a reporter has its very rewarding side. But it sort of inflects every story too. Like I was just remembering that there might be a story out there about, well, how robust are co-ops as opposed to non-co-ops in contending with the pandemic and the losses incurred through the pandemic? And is there any data out there that would demonstrate that there might be a difference? And then you've got an excuse, you've got a trend excuse to go profile a co-op that's being, more or less successful. And, we're just as interested in co-ops don't do as well as traditional businesses as we are in co-ops do better than traditional businesses with these challenges. Either story is a good one to do from our point of view, if we can demonstrate it with data and then humanize it by visits in person. But that means a visit, for us, we have to, our bosses make us get masked up, and we have booms on our mics. We have to social distance. Our HR teams are very wary of us getting into trouble out there. Editors are a little more loosey-goosey, forgive me, Maureen. They're more like, yeah, go out and get that story, you get in the middle of the situation, but not to an irresponsible point. But so it changes everything. You have to think about every move you make more. It's tiring and time consuming. But
thanks, Fred.
There's interesting new angles in the world out there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I've been thinking, and I've been talking inside CDI and with the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance about how do we get that data? Are co-ops faring better than, say, another small business with a single proprietor, who may not have been able to get any relief from the CARES Act? The small businesses are the backbone of the state of Maine, as you said before. Many of them are, we call it the silver tsunami, and aging out of the workforce. And so we have a real concern about how do we preserve these businesses and how do we preserve our co-ops. And I think there's some people who are on this participating today that, kind of, I think, heard you loud and clear about if we can find that data and really make the case that cooperatives have been more resilient from an economic and revenue perspective and stability perspective about not laying off employees and being able to, pay the bills and stay break even or make a profit, in contrast to other parts of the private sector. So I've made a note of that on my legal pad, and I'm going to work with some folks to see if we can find those numbers. Chris, what's it been like for you?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, there's just been the general squeeze for Mainer in terms of revenue, so we haven't produced as much content as we have in the past. But I think you make a good point in terms of the pandemic itself being a really newsworthy angle for any cooperative. I think it's great to note that, you do want to at least have some time pass. Like, I think right when the pandemic hit, the way that co-ops were functioning or handling it, is an okay story, but actually 6 months down the line, it becomes a more interesting story because now you actually have some experience you can draw upon and how that co-op responded to the crisis. And I think it can continue to be, that angle can continue to be a good angle, up to another whole year from the pandemic's beginning in the spring. And data is good on that kind of stuff. There's also just a simple fact that the co-op did survive. And I think you can look at it in terms of like, what was it about the co-op in particular that made it so that they didn't face, for example, some of these conflicts between employer and employee that was very typical of the pandemic? How is the PPP money being spent and that sort of stuff? Like, there are unique things that, worker co-ops in particular have, I think, some unique strengths. And the pandemic has pointed out these tensions between employers and employees. So you could zero in on that angle there and say, what is it about the nature of a worker cooperative that gives a resiliency, because everyone really is in it together in that sense. So yeah, I think these are all kind of newsworthy angles for cooperatives to, compare the cooperatives' performance to how businesses around them are struggling or failing or having a hard time because they don't have that sense of we're all in it together. And that's, we've seen a lot of stories about this already. I think you could do an interesting story, as well about like the housing co-ops in that situation, landlord tenant, classic tension. You don't have this problem in a resident owned community. There may be other problems that are interesting that come up for sure. But I think that's an angle that you could highlight in a story is, how does the cooperative nature of this enterprise make it different from the conventional enterprises that are feeling stress or failing because of their structure, because of the tensions built into the nature of their business that may not exist in a cooperative.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I've been thinking about that, about, just employee-owned or worker-owned or consumer-owned co-ops, and kind of looking at, were cooperatives able to keep everybody on staff or employed throughout this without facing layoffs that, for a privately owned business or corporation, when your revenue declines like that, often, employees, workers are laid off in response. And so there's something, I think, for us to maybe survey our cooperatives in Maine and see if we can get a story together that we could pitch all three of you on. Maureen, how's it affected you and MainBiz's ability to cover statewide with the limited number of employers you got?
Well, it's been quite overwhelming, and every day we hear from businesses that are either having problems or are finding solutions. And because of our limited ability to cover, not necessarily because of the pandemic, but just because of our resources and the amount of news we produce is limited, we need it's one thing to say, for instance, the residential co-ops, we don't have the landlord-tenant problems. Okay, then what's the next thing you're going to say after that? Or otherwise it's a 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph story. So I'm not saying we don't, it's kind of like whack-a-mole sometimes, that in our daily report in particular, we're not running stories about this individual business is doing this and this one's doing that, but we need the further step of, yes, we're surviving, we're different from these kinds of businesses because blah, blah, blah. And so this is what's unique about us. As far as I agree with what Fred said about getting out and mingling with people, that's been not, that is where you pick up stories. And I've had some in-person socially distanced wearing mask things. Before I do that, I always make sure the person I'm going to go meet is going to do that too. We're at work, it's up to us whether we want to do that or not. And I don't spend a lot of time inside any place besides my house in Hannaford. So if I can meet people outside and do that, I will. MainBiz has, like everybody else, advertising is what pays for publications. And when businesses aren't doing well, they don't pay for advertising, but we're doing fairly well. We actually introduced a podcast, which some of us have been pushing to do for a couple of years, as a new product, and it's doing well. But I would say I agree with Fred. I'm glad I'm a journalist during this, and it's the biggest thing we'll ever cover, but it's hard when you're in the middle of it to see what's going on. And just one final thing on that, in March and April, there were a lot of little specific stories about things. 6 months out, those little specific stories that seem important aren't news anymore, and it's the bigger picture. And the one other benefit has been virtual meetings. I can attend a Yarmouth Planning Board meeting or a Bridgeton Planning Board meeting or something from the comfort of my living room instead of deciding if I really want to drive at 7 o'clock at night to Yarmouth or Bridgeton or somewhere. And I hope that continues, because I'm not a big fan, I'm on Zoom way too much, but I do appreciate being able to tap in places that I wasn't before.
Thanks. Yeah, I think of journalists as essential to our community, to our state. And I can only imagine, I was very, went into lockdown. I only went to the Hannaford or stayed in my condo for what seemed like forever. But, there's a really personal thing for all of us about COVID and how we really have to guard ourselves and limit our exposure. So for me, I've always thought about, journalists kind of being sent out into the field during this time. And to kind of, there must be an added stress factor, I would imagine, for you guys, as you really try to protect yourself first, as you're trying to do the job that you do. So with that, and again, we're a little ahead of schedule, I'm just going to open this up a little bit with you all. There are obviously best practices in interacting with journalists and the media. We've just learned about a bunch of them. There's certainly do's and don'ts. And as we've kind of covered a lot of this, but what's the one thing you should never do with a journalist? Maureen.
Well, there are a lot of one things, but I would say if you're not familiar with dealing with news media, don't expect your vision of what the story is to be what their story is, because they're not your publicity rep. They're a news organization, and a good journalist will look at the story and decide what the story is, probably within context of other things going on. And it may be wildly different from what you thought it was going to be. And I know that sounds scary, but it's the nature of news business that we're not there to pitch somebody else's vision out to the world, but there to decide, to figure out what the news is and determine that. That said, you should be able to trust that you're going to be quoted accurately, and that the context of which you say things is portrayed correctly. But you should be very clear, if you haven't dealt with journalists before, if you're just talking kind of background off the record, be sure you say that, because if somebody calls me, or if I call up somebody and say, "Hi, I'm Maureen Milliken from MainBiz. I have some questions for you about blah, blah, blah," I'm going to assume everything they say to me is something I can use in my story. And I've, recognized over almost 40 years of doing this, that I started when I was 2. No, I'm kidding. But that sometimes people who aren't familiar with dealing with the press don't realize you're writing a news article, even though you tell them you're a reporter and that's why you're calling. But be aware of what you say and how you say it. And it's okay to say, wait a minute, I'm not sure what I just told you should be in the story. And an ethical journalist will say, yeah, okay. On the other hand, if it's public record, if you said it at a planning board meeting, or if there's, you know, a public record of what you said, if there are public documents, the journalist that, you know, is going to use it whether you want them to or not. That's the number one, I think.
Yeah, no, I've learned this too. Last year, I was working with a brand new reporter. I won't name her or whatever. But there was a story that she wanted to tell that wasn't the story that was accurate. And it spanned the course of a couple of weeks of back and forth, where they would actually send me like a quote that I didn't say, or a sentence or two that was wholly inaccurate. And it really created a lot of tension for me back and forth with that reporter, with that journalist. Eventually, and it was one of the more difficult relationships I'd ever had with a journalist, that I really had to kind of wrestle and say, no, that's either I did not say that, or that's not accurate. And
can I interject here, Doug, too, that I would wonder why the person was sending you stuff back and forth. I know different, particularly national magazines and stuff, work differently than we do, but in my journalism career, both at newspapers and at MainBiz, we do not send a news article to be reviewed by people we've talked to. I'll send quotes sometimes if somebody's asked, but people like to change their quotes too. And when you send a story for somebody to review, they want to start editing the story and changing the angle.
Right.
And I guess it comes down to, I know it's a scary thing, you have to be able to trust the journalist you're dealing with. And if you're seeking out a journalist to cover a story, and it's not a journalist coming to you, the best thing to do is read stuff the person has written, and maybe even talk to people who the journalist has written about and say, do you feel that this person did a good job with the story? I still stand by the fact that the story may not be what you think the story is, and that's the journalist's prerogative. But if you're in the position of soliciting coverage, you may want to ask people who have dealt with journalists who a good journalist is to talk to. Some of us get few complaints about what we write about. As some people I know, as an editor who supervised reporters, sometimes you get complaints all the time. Just like any other industry, there are people who do their jobs well and who care about accuracy and detail and getting it right. And there are people who just don't give a crap. So, you know, sorry to say.
All right. Fred, what are the do's? We've already talked about some of the do's, but for you in Maine Public, what are the absolute don'ts when someone brings a story to you?
I wouldn't say, besides calling or emailing me after 3 p.m., that there are any. I'm willing to, consider any kind of point of view. You shouldn't expect to be able to control the narrative. I'm going to have to echo what Maureen is saying. We do need to present multiple points of view. And there's an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed lately. I don't know how relevant that may be to the work that some of you all are doing, but don't try to limit my access. Like, if you bring me on site to a trailer park, well, I'm going to wander that trailer park with you or without you. Now, if you want to be sensitive to, that there are going to be some people at the trailer park who want absolutely nothing to do with the journalist, well, you can flag that for me, because I'm a human being. I don't want to unduly get in people's faces unless there's a really strong news need for it. I was at a Black Lives Matter protest at City Hall a couple months ago now, and the people who were organizing it were trying to limit our access to people who were speaking from the steps of City Hall. And that's just not okay from a journalist's point of view. It's a public space. You invited us there. You're going to have to deal with us doing our thing. And it's a concerning thing that people who want to speak in the public square might also want to limit coverage of that. So it's an interesting conversation to have. There were, that particular event did end up with good one-on-one conversations with people, but at first there was some real conflict between the press and the organizers over access. And
Interesting.
if it's your event and you've invited me, you're gonna have to let me go. Now, mind you, I've also had the Secret Service like frog march me out of a Hillary Clinton event. So, it's
Is there any video of that, Fred?
I wish. I'll fight anybody who tries to limit my access to something that they've invited me to.
Understood. So this goes back to Chris's comment earlier. If I'm coming out to cover you, it's warts and all. Not that we have any warts in our cooperatives, but it is a fair game, and it is what it is. Chris, what are the absolute? Has anybody ever like burned a bridge with you, stepped onto the third rail, where they did something, and you're just like, I'm done. Like I don't ever want to work or hear from you again.
No, not necessarily, but I think some of my colleagues here have mentioned like it is a bit kind of rubs you the wrong way if people act like they're going to tell you how to write the story, and or for me this idea that someone would approach me because we of course do tend to do really edgy journalism. So if someone comes to me and really wants just like a fluffy article that's basically just an ad for them, that rubs me the wrong way, because to me that kind of strikes right at the integrity of what we're doing. If you kind of assume that, never kind of assume that a news outlet exists to be a PR firm or to do your PR work, reporters are not going to respond well to that. That being said, I think for the most part, what we're really talking about here are feature stories, not news stories, so that's important to keep in mind if you're looking for a feature story. And then also I would add that if you have some sort of event that you're doing, that in and of itself is probably not going to be newsworthy, but if you are, you can also get just that event listed in a lot of publications. Mainer, before the pandemic, was listing arts events, and I know like the Press Herald or the BDN, Phoenix will have like sections for events. So if you're just doing a grand opening celebration or something fun like that, feel free in those cases, make sure you have all the information that a reader would need to know to go to that event. Don't be shy about sending a photo or two. Editors who are putting together those sorts of sections always appreciate a photo. And I would also say, consider if you're just doing an event, if you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to get free press coverage, it might actually be better for you to just go ahead and take out an ad. It's like time is money. And, if you're going to be running around and spending a day and doing all this stuff, if it's worth it to you to spend a few $100s, then your event is going to be in that publication or on that station. So, definitely consider that if you have the option, especially this is specifically for events. Yeah, I mean, again, for the most part, if you're just talking about something feel good, it's a feature story, it's something that's happening. I don't think you need to be super uptight about how you approach those kind of things. Just lay it out.
Great. Thank you. So we've heard today, if you're going to interact with the media, there are some definite dues. One is know your outlet. Know the type of outlet that they are, if they're statewide, if they're local, what they cover. The second thing is if you're going to reach out to a journalist, maybe do a little homework first. See what that journalist has covered in the past and how they've covered it. how you can find, your contact information is pretty public. And that if you're going to reach out to a reporter, email is definitely the best. If there's an opportunity, certainly now in a COVID-19 world, where you can meet in a safe way in person with a journalist for a cup of coffee, for lunch, or God forbid, Chris, for a beer, which Jonah and I met Chris out one night and really just kind of talked to him about what interests him, and it was really helpful for us. So building a personal rapport with a journalist, and again, it's really based on trust, because once that trust is broken, it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to get it back. So with that in mind, each of your co-ops have a great story to tell. We're going to be moving here in a couple minutes to some breakout sessions. And for participants, what I want you to think about is a story about your co-op or someone in your co-op that you think deserves to be told. And you're going to reach out, you're going to make a pitch. So if whoever we're going to do this randomly, but think about your co-op, think about something that's really impactful that you think needs to be told, and interact with these journalists in Maine and see if you can successfully pitch a story. Then we're going to come back and we're going to see if anyone had any success, and we'll talk about why that was successful and maybe why it wasn't. And then I'm going to, if we have some time, I want to give, open it up for a couple of direct questions to these journalists while we have them here. How does that sound? All right. So it's 2:13. We're pretty much running this like a railroad. I had this bookmarked for 2:15. And then we're going to come back. You're going to have about, let's see what it is. About 20 minutes for this. And then we're going to return. And we're going to do just what I explained. And then we'll have some final remarks, and we're going to thank these folks. All right. So Jasmine, Catherine, Emmy, I'm not sure who's working the breakout magic, but let's do your magic. And then make sure you teleport us all back. All right.
So I hope you had a great time interacting with the media. With Maine's journalists. And I'm going to use this time to ask each one of the journalists, what was a story that piqued your attention? And I'm going to start with Maureen.
Well, I had a great group of very newsy people, and there were two stories that, and I hesitate to say what they are because I don't want Chris and Fred to steal my stories, but I guess I'm going to have to talk about them, aren't I? Eric pitched a story about a new food co-op in Lewiston that is a partnership. I won't go into all the details, but he had information about who's involved, what they're doing, that it's a something that's kind of been in the making for 50 years and addresses some of the food desert issues of Lewiston that I think would be a great story that I hope to connect on in the next couple of weeks, unless someone beats me to it. And even if someone beats me to it, I'll still do it. And then John had a more bigger picture story about how food co-ops early in the pandemic made provisions to keep the supply chain going and have been more successful than a lot of stores and stuff at providing food. And again, I won't go into a lot of details, but John had a good big picture story that spoke to things that are going on and how it's addressing an issue and how the co-ops stand out. And Eric had a more specific story, a Lewiston-based story, but it's a good one that everybody would be interested to read on how they're forming a new type of food co-op that will address many of the issues in Lewiston. So it was great. And people had good questions too. We talked a little in general about pitching and finding specific news outlets for your stories and that type of thing.
Great. Thanks, Maureen. Fred, anybody pique your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to Deborah, who was able to sort of give me a big picture of some things going on in the loaning community, but then had a specific story of a specific entrepreneurs trying to get going during the pandemic. And it's one that I like. It's a good story. But this is one of those places where the story is maybe slightly different from what she was most interested in, which were some of the details of trying to get a two-person co-op up and running. I wasn't so interested in a two-person versus a three-person co-op, which I'm sure for her is like really, really interesting. But I was interested in young entrepreneurs trying to make a go of it during the pandemic. And the fact that the co-op becomes, an ancillary part of the story, very much part of the story, but that's also a trend. That's just a really interesting place to look as a reporter. Okay, where are the bright spots out here? As we're telling all these stories of failure all over the place, where are things going a little differently? What are the personalities doing so, and how are they able to do it? And then I was talking with Arthur, who, this is a story that I know has been out there, and he just reminded me of it, which is the trend towards new Mainers forming housing cooperatives, and it's being able to buy multi-units and occupy them. And it sounds like it's a trend that's building. It's got some momentum. It's showing success, and that's something that I can work with as well and pitch to my editors. I can't guarantee when they'll bite, but I think they will at some point. We got cut off just when I was saying, let me know when someone's about to occupy a new structure. But I don't want it to be a press event. That's not when I want to go. I want to go when I'm the first reporter to get in there and be able to document that moment when someone is getting shelter through this kind of model. One thing that came up with this that I realized that I wanted to mention is that it's important to be in touch with reporters, not just when you have a story to pitch, because you guys are experts in your field, and we need you to keep us informed. So when I was talking with Deborah, she had some thoughts about various. I know now that she's someone I can turn to say, hey, what's going on with lending during the this pandemic, and who's making it, who's falling off the cliff, and I need sources like that I can check in with periodically, or he will send me a note, not necessarily because they have a story for me per se, but just to say, hey, did you know that this is sort of happening out there? You might be interested in it. Those kinds of relationships are really, really important, and they're ones that lead to also, me grilling you in ways that actually might produce a story that's very much one that you want to get out for PR reasons of your own. But it's by virtue of just me being able to tap into your knowledge base reliably over time is a really good kind of relationship to develop.
All right, thanks, Fred. Chris Busby, what story grabbed you?
Well, I heard some interesting angles in terms of how food co-ops were trying to make it through the pandemic. As I noted to those pictures, that's been a fairly general story in terms of essential workers and dealing with customers who might be irate about pandemic requirements. But I think being a co-op, does provide some story angle there. The story that for me really was completely new was from Scott, the Spoke Folks story. He was describing a type of business hauling trash from people's homes and businesses to the town dump using bicycles. It's something I'd never heard of before. It was totally new concept to me. So, when you have something that's an entirely new, even kind of type of business, at least in terms of what I've ever heard of before, that's immediately interesting. And it's a story that has a lot of good visuals and a lot of other kind of side angles to it that I think are appealing. He was describing some efforts that they did to distribute meals to people during the pandemic from food pantries, and how, you know, the pandemic kind of forced them to expand what their services are in ways they didn't necessarily expect. So I think that's a really interesting story that certainly grabbed my attention, for sure.
All right. So it sounds like our folks did pretty good, because you guys can be a tough crowd to pitch a story to. I know from personal and professional experience. So I think that was really well done. And we said we'd end in about 5 minutes. And I'm not going to pitch you on a story, but I will probably email you about an event that we're putting on. I know, events, rule number 1. But we've got a really good, I think, press event coming up. I'll let you guys know about it by email, and I'll let you know by email shortly. But I'd like to open it up. If anybody wants to use the chat box or use the little thing for your hand, we've got a couple minutes to go. For me and for CDI and for the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance, I just really want to thank you. It's a Friday, you're journalists. This is a chunk of time that you committed in your workday. And I know that you've got a lot going on. So I just really wanted to say a sincere thanks from all of us for your participation today. So, Emmy, if there's any questions before we close out, if there's any final comments, let's take them. And then if you can remind us when we're due back here, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to let the journalists go and go back to work, covering the great state of Maine. So we've got time for maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 questions, if anyone's got one.
I just saw one by Rob Brown in the chat that I would love to address.
Okay.
Walk us through a really great press release. What's in it? And it hits on something that I feel very strongly about. So, as I said earlier, you want to have in the subject line what it is. You want to, in the email, say what it is. If you can do it without it being an attachment, that would be awesome. I know a lot of people just take a press release and cut and paste it and then publish it. I don't do that, but I do cut and paste because I don't like to retype, particularly quotes from people. So no bold facing, underlining, all caps, italics, different colors. You're just wasting your time, and I have to undo all that stuff when I cut and paste your great quotes and stuff into my article. The most important thing is to have what the news is at the top. However long it's going to be, whatever, have what the news is, so I don't have to read 500 words and try to figure out why I'm getting this, and cover the classic 5 W's: who, what, when, why, and where, so that I look at a press release as a tool to writing a story, even if it's going to be a brief story. And I don't mind having to find background information or other types of things, but I need to know if this is part of some bigger thing, who the people are, what the organization is, which sometimes people leave out, where in Maine this is. And if you have a photo, that's great. It's best, I know this is just kind of technical, but to attach it to the email separately rather than embedding it in a Word doc or a PDF, and provide full caption informations, not Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones, but their actual first and last names and who they are and why they're in this photo. So have the basics and all the information. Formatting, no, don't. And let me know what the news is right away, and I'm happy.
All right. We have time for one last question. Going once, going twice.
I killed them with the press release thing.
Scott has a question.
Oh, what about if you're pitching to a radio station? There's no picture involved there, right? I mean, so what do you want to hear, Fred? Or see?
Well, we have a fairly robust website, but we generally we only use our own photos. It used to be a strict rule. It's less strict now, particularly during the pandemic. The editors are a little more willing to use content produced by people other than us, particularly visual content. So a picture counts. I mean, for instance, I get a lot of emails about endangered North Atlantic right whales, and we'll use those pictures, our digital people too. But so, I want it to be short. I do just want the bare bones. What's the trend? What's the specific person or component of the trend that would be coverable? Who would I visit with about it? And if it's an event driven, put the event date and time near the top. Don't make me go all the way to the bottom to find it out when it is, particularly if it's the same day event. Because if it's something that we did want to cover, it means we got to get our equipment together and get out the door. So, and also I do go back to what Chris was saying, is just a little bit of personalization goes a long way.
All right. Thank you all. Again, we think we've learned a lot from you guys today. We really appreciate it. And we're going to be following up with some of those pitches that caught your ear and piqued your interest. So thanks again. Have a great weekend. And for the folks here, we're going to take a bit of a break. So I'm going to give a round of applause. Thanks again for being part of this.
Thank you so much. And for the rest,
when are we back?
Yeah, for the rest of us, we will take a 10-minute break and come back at 3 o'clock. See you all then. So thinking that everyone should be trickling back in right about now, and Doug will take us on this next journey.
So we're going to get going. This is the last and final session of the 7th annual Principle 6 conference. Thanks for everybody for the 3 days of participation today, or this week, pardon me. And we're going to use this last time together to talk about how we use communications to advance our co-op advocacy efforts. One of the ways we can continue to expand Maine's cooperative ecosystem and ecosystems in other states and across the country is to use communications. And we use those communications in kind of 3 ways. So we're going to talk about that. You know who I am. I'm going to co-facilitate this with Rob Brown, also from the Cooperative Development Institute. And we're going to start with just kind of some basic communications. You heard from the journalists earlier what makes a good story and what they will cover. I wanted to offer up some examples of communications pieces where we did pitch them, got their attention, and got us some good press. So Jasmine, if you'd move us to the second slide, we're going to roll through just a couple of examples. This was MainBiz. Maureen Milliken, who was with MainBiz, I'm pretty sure she wrote this one. But here's a grant, in order to do the work that we do, Cooperative Development Institute, it's really important for us to be able to access and draw down a combination of federal support through the USDA, private support, like from Maine foundations like Sewell Foundation or J.T. Gorman, Maine Community Foundation. But it really also, we use communications so that we want policymakers, legislators, city council members, to be able to see our work, read our work in outlets that they frequent. So this was announcing some of the USDA funding that CDI receives. This is from October of 2018. And we got some great coverage here in MainBiz for CDI, but more importantly for the program work that we were doing, that Rob's spearheading up in Washington County with the Ownership Transition Initiative. If you can go to the next slide, Jasmine. Here's another example. This was a 48-hour turnaround. I'm probably going to hear back from Maureen that Fred Bever better not scoop my story. This is the Portland Co-op proposal that the City of Portland's Economic Community Development Committee, a subcommittee of the City Council, voted to endorse and award one of 2 city-owned tracts of land to be developed for affordable housing. And one of those awards, the Lancaster Street, which is like a 14-acre parcel, we got some great coverage in MainBiz. And my audience here is the Portland City Council. And they postponed the vote. They're going to probably take it up in about 2 more weeks. But this was really, the audience here was the Portland City Council. And we're going to make sure that we email this to all of them so that they really can understand the story of what we're doing with the Cooperative Maine Development Partners in Portland. So you heard Maureen covered this story when I pitched it to her. And you heard that Arthur got Fred Bever's ear on this one, and how Fred would cover this story if the City Council votes to move this forward. Next. This was one that also appeared in MainBiz. This became a national story. This is Senate President Troy Jackson, a logger himself, putting in a piece of legislation in the Maine State House that allowed Maine's loggers up in Aroostook County to form a co-op and to be able to collectively bargain for better prices for the lumber that they're harvesting. And they also wound up with a Quebec company to purchase all of that wood directly from the cooperative. So here's an example, again, of coverage about some advocacy. Well, we didn't really have a direct hand in this one. We just had been talking to Troy for years. And this did get national attention and was covered across the country in some AP pickups. Next. Here's one from the Mainer. This is about New Roots Cooperative Farm in Lewiston, Maine. And we can make these available to all of you if you'd like. We can send you a copy of the slide deck so you can blow it up and actually read the articles. Here, CDI's Omar Hassan really did a wonderful job in working with Chris, working with our clients at New Roots to really tell a really fantastic story about how this immigrant population has really come together, has formed the co-op, and has been able to really not only just survive, but to thrive in Lewiston after, a lot of challenges and more than a couple setbacks. Next. So here's one from Maine Public. This was from Caitlin Troutman. This again was about New Roots Farm. This goes back to 2018. If you see the farm today, it looks a lot different than the picture on your left. But again, this is a great story in Maine Public. Next. And I'm not sure on my screen, it hasn't gone to the next one. Oh, here it is. This was the Maine Calling episode. Fred said, he took the pitch to his editor, Susan Sharon, and she didn't quite bite, but he suggested, there's other formats with Maine Public Radio. And this was actually an hour-long statewide panel discussion live with Keith Shortall. And when we got some feedback from the producer, she said, this has been one of the most heavily engaged Maine Calling that we ever did. So this was a story about how we got Maine's co-op economy out to literally anyone listening on Maine Calling, which is a pretty wide group of people who listen in during their lunch hour. Next. I'm going to turn to John Crane for this. The Portland Food Co-op. When you think about how your individual co-ops can actually use their marketing, use their events, and actually, work with the press on a local level to tell the community story. John, are you back with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. You want to just tell us a little bit about how the Portland Food Co-op uses communications and marketing to lift up not just you as a business, but also some kind of deeper stories about the co-op?
Well, when I was really thinking about this topic, I wanted to make sure that I was being accessible to co-ops of all sizes. I mean, we're fortunate at the Portland Food Co-op that we do have, well, I call it a marketing department. We have a marketing department of one, but we do have someone who's actually dedicated to our social media and our marketing and our press releases and things like that. Not every co-op is sort of that scale or is that fortunate that your social media may be managed by whichever member has a little bit of affinity for that and has some space in the afternoon to do it. So I wanted to sort of make what I'm saying a little accessible to everyone. The most important thing that we always keep in mind is telling our story. I think so many co-ops do so much good in the world, and we are not very good advocates for ourselves. We just by our very nature or structure of who we are, just like care for community, we do good things and we don't talk about them, or they're not evident, at least when you walk by or maybe see our website or something like that. So that's really the heart of our social media, or when we get press or get picked up on, it's usually because of a hook around that. Where if we are able to make any type of donation for anything or help sponsor any kind of event or even spreading the word on stuff, I think especially in this day and age, not only is there a increased awareness, I think, with consumers or just people in general about making values-based decisions, which maybe 20 years ago, to give you an example, it's just because I come from the food co-op world, that more people today care about where their food came from. And that is just something that's completely just so important, like how the people involved in the entire food chain or animals or whatever were treated, and there were their good decisions made along the way. I grew up in a generation that could have cared less. And that's a shift in generations. And I think it's a wonderful shift in generations. My parents never would have asked, what were the conditions like for the people who picked this lettuce or made my hamburger helper or whatever it was. And so people are very interested in a lot of their decisions in who's doing right by our community, who's doing right by the world, who can I support and trust that they're doing good things with my loyalty, patronage, donation, whatever it is. So lift those up. I'd say, especially if you're in a type of business, I almost say lifting up the good that you do is more important than lifting up your goods and services. People will find your goods and services as long as they know what type of business you are. But in any other realm, housing or anything else, making sure people know, A, you exist, and why you are different, why you are a housing co-op versus a condo. And there are so many people in the world who don't get that distinction, especially if you grew up in a city where, the idea of your housing situation going co-op is a negative, not a positive thing. And so really thinking about how people from the outside either see or don't see your business and really talk that up. And so that's sort of the crux of what we do, because we actually don't do a lot of, I want to say, full media advertising. We do local print, and that's about it. We've done a little radio in the past, but most of ours is through our own social media and through our own email, telling our story.
Yeah, and John, can you also talk a little bit, you heard Chris Busby earlier from the Mainer talk about, hey, sometimes it's just easier if you want exposure to advertise. And I have noticed in the Mainer that the Portland Food Co-op every month has an ad, and that must have been a very targeted decision for you.
Yes, we And that's another, and this is sort of a marketing principle that goes back quite a few years. Consistency is really key. Putting an ad in one channel, one time has very limited exposure. I have to dial it back to something you can afford to do on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on what channel you're doing, and do it consistently. And think about, I'm gonna say, the audience of that organization. Like, we very specifically choose Mainer because they're a co-op, but actually was working with Mainer before they became a co-op, because they have sort of a values, they make values decisions in the type of news that they cover and the type of voice that they take. And we felt it very much agreed with the co-op's voice. And so we thought putting our stamp there said that if you agree with some of the stuff that this organization does, you might be interested in us too. There's also, I think, the other full year contract we do here in our co-op is with Jumbo, which is an online and print news organization here. Well, there's an office here in Portland, Maine. They have many places, but specific to the immigrant and new American communities. And we do that, number one, to support what they do through our advertising, but also to help to send the message that, like, we support you, we are not against you, we believe in what you're doing. And so, right. Yeah, so we're really thinking about, it's the channel and how many people are going to see it, do it consistently, but also think, what message are you sending by which choices that you make? It's why we've never gone to, say, like commercial radio. Just for us, it didn't feel like the effective channel, or didn't say anything about us. We have done stuff with Maine Public, because we felt that, like, possibly that did.
Great, John, thank you. Yeah. Next slide, please. All right, at this point, we just talked about how we do strategic advertising for a certain base or audience that we think aligns with our values. And here's an example, and then I'm going to turn this over to Rob, but this is an advertisement that the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance placed at this year's Common Ground Fair, put on by the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he's also going to talk about, here's some branding. We've got a tagline that we use, Cooperatives Build a Better Maine, which is one that we always hammer. You can see the co-ops from Maine that are listed here that help support this ad. Emmy did a fantastic job raising money, so thanks to all of you and your organizations that help make this possible. But in this, and you'll see it when it gets blown up a little bit, and we might not be able to do that now, but we also want to talk about, and you heard this a little bit also from Fred, about the economic impact that co-ops are having in the state of Maine. Rob, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know everybody on here, so just to make sure people know who I am, my name is Rob Brown, and I'm on the steering committee of the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance, and I'm a program director for Cooperative Development Institute, working with businesses on transitions to worker cooperatives. So everyone has an idea who I am. So this is, this ad, I wanted to transition on this ad, and it was an ad, because it does a couple of things. This was developed, I think this ran in Mainer. It ran in some of the Mid-Coast weekly newspapers, because we had some geographic targeted resources to help pay for that. And then it's run for 2 years now in MOFGA's, Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association newspaper, the one that comes out for the Common Ground Fair, which they print 100,000 copies of. So the interesting thing about this is it sort of demonstrates in an ad, and it gets to Chris's point, right? Like, we wanted to get this out there in the way we wanted it out there, so we paid for it. And we raised money from co-ops to make it really affordable for everyone to participate. But what we were doing is demonstrating sort of the breadth and depth of cooperatives in Maine, and also branding Cooperative Maine Business Alliance. And if you look on the left-hand side, we were trying to make a point there that like co-ops are everywhere. Co-ops are in numerous ways, they are significant portions of our economy, whether you think about credit unions, whether you think about lobster co-ops that represent about 1/3 of the industry. People don't, like Fred Bever would never know that, right? But when you put a statistic like that, what's called social statistic, where it's something in context, that's how you can get a reporter's attention. So, and you know, you could be talking about your membership in Belfast, if you're the Belfast Co-op, or in the Norway region, as a percentage of the population, like that would get attention, right? So this ad was accomplishing a number of things, and we used it quite a bit. And when you demonstrate statistics like that on the side, that sort of did you know social math type statement of facts, policymakers and politicians start paying attention, because that means there's people, that means there's economic activity, and that means there's votes, and that's, you know, they're politicians. Right? So, oh, I'm trying to advance the slide myself here. Jasmine, could you please do that for me? Thank you. So as an example of that, we, a number of us sort of had meetings in the 2018 gubernatorial election. We sought out conversations with all 4 gubernatorial candidates, 2 independents were Republican, and our current governor, Janet Mills. And we educated those folks about cooperatives, the cooperative economy. We made sure they understood the statistics, like what was on that previous ad, and talked about how it connected directly to improving Maine people's lives, Maine's economy, Maine jobs, Maine's affordable housing. Very concrete examples. It was very well received by all 4 candidates. All 4 candidates talked about how, yeah, they want to be a champion. First out of the gate happened to be Janet Mills, who did this press conference with her economic plan, and little did we know the like lifted numerous things from the meeting we had with her staff into her economic plan. And she did this press conference at an employee-owned company in Augusta, and was featuring that. Like, this is what the future of Maine's economy should look more like, employee-owned businesses. And had some boilerplate stuff from her plan on the side there. But it was interesting because Sean Moody, who's a Republican candidate, is probably the most well-known person in the state when it comes to employee stock ownership plan companies, ESOPs. So then the story on Maine Public Radio devolved a little bit into who's more supportive of employee ownership. This was supposed to be a story about Janet Mills' economic plan for Maine, and they immediately ran to Sean Moody for a comment when she talked about employee ownership, because they knew they could create some he said, she said clickbait there. And it was pretty funny to listen to, and the story is still up. So we were pretty happy with that outcome. Jasmine, could you forward, please? So given what we felt was good momentum, we had a bill, and a number of you participated in various ways, either emailing legislators, or some of you did testimony when this was a bill. But we introduced a bill, LD 1520, and we were able, because of the momentum and the media that we had generated, particularly in Lewiston, the Lewiston region, around cooperative development, so much energy, we were able to get the state senator from Lewiston, who happened to be the Senate Majority Leader, so like, you know, good political power there to move things if they want, to sponsor this bill, to be the lead sponsor. And we also sought out like an equal number of Republicans and Democrats from all over the state, so it was like really good geographic and political representation in sponsoring this. So it couldn't be pigeonholed in any one particular way. But having the Senate Majority Leader sponsor this, and have him do it because he felt from what he had seen in his own community, like, yeah, this should be part of our economic and community development strategy in this state. And in fact, Nathan Libby, the state senator, came and spoke at last year's Principal 6 conference as part of this, because it was in Lewiston, and he was really excited have it be in Lewiston. We recognize CMBA as a force for that. So this was a piece of legislation that would have benefited transfer of assets to any cooperative. So, you know, if a food co-op wanted to buy a building, like they could have used this to leverage it. And a mobile home park residents buying the park could have used this tax benefit to leverage that. A group of workers buying a business could have done that. And it would have also created state funding for a Maine Employee Ownership Center, which would be a state-based technical resource center. So it was very highly regarded. It was universally supported by the Taxation Committee and the House and Senate. You know, like everything else that cost anything, once it got to the Appropriations Committee in this early spring, and then the legislature was basically shut down. And this is a very modest price tag on this bill considering the impact. But, you know, now the whole world has changed. We've gone from having surpluses as far as the eye can see to a $1.5 billion deficit that they're going to go back into Augusta in a couple of months and have to deal with. So, you know, we had great momentum, but we don't know what's going to happen from here on out. If you could go to the next slide, please. And so getting to the communications aspect of this, I'm just going to flip through a couple of slides here. These are examples of different types of messages in different media outlets from different messengers, all advocating for LD 1520. So this was an op-ed that I wrote that was in the Press Herald, and it did have a bit of a Southern Maine focus in the way it talked about the economy. And then if you could jump to the next slide, please, Jasmine. And then this is a different messenger at a very different region and a different economy. This is written by InSource Renewables, and they submitted it to the Waterville Morning Sentinel, right? As like staff, as a group of workers who are taking over a business. And this is just full of all sorts of human interests, like young workers in a growing industry, and they're buying their future. And Pittsfield, they want to create a stronger economy in Pittsfield, Maine, and this is part of it. And it was a great message, and it was perfectly tailored to like the Central Maine audience. And it came from a locally recognized business that was transitioning to a worker cooperative. The next slide, please, Jasmine. And so, you know, that was all in a lead up. That was to create momentum and energy around this particular bill. And these are just a couple of pictures from that public hearing. That's Senator Nathan Libby, the Senate Majority Leader, who's the lead sponsor on this bill in the, what is that, the left? And then in the upper center, that's Sean Moody, who was just defeated as Republican candidate for governor. He came and talked about this. And if you've ever heard him speak, it's kind of funny. He has a thick Maine accent, and he's just every sentence is larded up with colloquialisms. But he really had the committee laughing and like rapped because he's a very engaging guy. That's next to the picture next to him is a large engineering firm in the state of Maine that's 100% employee owned. Sebago Technics, he's the CEO and president. And they were really speaking like the power of employee ownership. And there were lots of other folks who were speaking, so like Maine Farmland Trust, who were talking about this as a farm succession and preserving Maine farmland. And you had mobile home park residents talking about how owning their park with their fellow residents changed their lives. And so all these different voices, all these different messages, all stacking up to one thing, like we need to expand cooperative employee ownership because it makes a difference in people's lives and people's communities from very different perspectives and very different people. And if that's a lesson, I think right there, if ever you're trying to advocate for your co-op in like a local paper, a weekly paper, or in a bigger media outlet, diversity of voices is so important. So that's an important lesson, I think. And then next slide, please, Jasmine. And just reinforcing that point, this was this is just a list of some of the folks and who they were from that testified. But you had, small businesses from all over the state, existing worker co-ops, different advocacy organizations like Grow Smart Maine, Maine Farmland Trust, numerous mobile home park residents who were speaking to how much it changed their life to own their park with their neighbors. Some farmers and Cooperative Fund of New England submitted testimony. So again, just a great diversity of voices, all added up, all saying very different things about why cooperatives and employee ownership matter to them, but all adding up to, so pass this bill because we want everyone to have, the benefits that we have. And it was very, very effective and led a very contentious, the taxation committee is oftentimes one of the most contentious committees in the legislature, and it got them all on unanimously in support of this bill. And then next slide, please, Jasmine, or is that the last one? Oh yeah. So this is a recent op-ed that was in the Bangor Daily. This is one that I wrote, but I wanted to put this in here because once COVID pandemic hit, and I knew that bill was like the legislature was not going back. That was pretty clear. I also was thinking about how I do what I do and why I do it, and what is the appetite for workers to want to take over a business in this kind of environment. Like that was a real kind of existential question. We started thinking about how perhaps a different way of approaching worker buyouts of businesses could fit this moment if business owners were looking to get out quicker. And there's all this data about like rapid closures of businesses that have closed for a few months and then they're not opening back up, hundreds of thousands of businesses nationally. So there's tons of data around this, around small business closures. And so this was a way to kind of pivot and repurpose what previously was sort of a somewhat happier, more optimistic presentation of this bill and say, this strategy could actually work in the middle of an economic crisis and a global pandemic too, by providing some support to businesses, to workers who want to buy out their business, and how it's a good strategy for the state to support, because who knows the business better than those who work there. So if we're trying to keep businesses open and keep the lights on in an environment of rapid business closures, looking to the employees might be a good option. You're not going to save every business, but you'd save more than if you ignore that opportunity. So I just wanted to use this as well as like how we pivoted in our message to fit the times of what previously was, like I said, more of a happier story, I guess, and this, which was more crisis driven and short term. So, and then the next slide, Jasmine, please. And then this is another example of the Portland Housing Cooperative communication. And this is a letter to the editor just after the Housing Committee, or the Economic and Community Development Committee, as they're called, voted to grant this piece of land to this cooperative development in Portland, this piece of city-owned land. Then there were some letters to the editor, and just, I think a day or two ago, there was an op-ed that got published backing this up, right? So there's an echo chamber effect that we also wanted to talk about. And I think John made the good point, like one ad, if you're gonna do advertising, you put out one ad, it's pointless, it's a waste of money. You've gotta have the sustained presence. And I guess that's another lesson I would give, is like the sustained presence, the multiplicity of voices. Like if you can get it and you can coordinate it, like if you're a co-op and you're encouraging members to write letters to the editor, like that could be a metric of success for your own cooperative, right? Like we have one member a month get a letter to the editor submitted to the paper that's published, and it's just like a nice voice, simple, I love my co-op for XYZ reasons. And that type of sustained attention can go a long ways in the long run. So I think that's our last slide, right? It is. So if we can stop the screen share. And so with that, we wanted to open it up to any of your thoughts or questions. I've done a lot of media work. Doug has done a lot of media work. And you heard from 3 prominent Maine reporters earlier. What are some, I'm curious what you think about how this could help you and the work that you're doing, whether it's for your specific co-op or maybe you're doing development work. What are some ways that this could be helpful? And to frame that up a little more, I also would say this is something that, you know, if there is interest, this is something that the Cooperative Maine Business Alliance could help coordinate in terms of support to co-ops. A strategy session. We could work through CMBA to offer that as a service, a communications marketing strategy session, help you flesh out a plan that you can pursue. So I'm trying to think very practically about like what you want to do, what you've learned, and how maybe CMBA could be helpful in helping you think through how to do it. And I'll just leave it to you to somebody speak up.
Well, actually, Rob, I have just not so much related to that particular question, but if I just wanted to get back to LD 1520 for a second. Is there anything that the co-op community can do to move this along to this at this point? Or do you think is the state just so immersed in COVID debt right now that we just need to put a pin there and come back later?
It's the legislative process, so you just got to be super nimble and ready to like super nimble, super opportunistic, shift on a dime. So by having said that, just the mechanics of the legislative process, like the bill is for all intents and purposes dead at this point because any bill from that legislative session will be dead. Once a new legislative session is put in. So technically, there is still a bunch of bills in the Appropriations Committee, but they're not coming back in. They're not going to meet. They're all campaigning, and there'll be an election, and there'll be a new legislature made up of whoever, and then officially, any bill from that legislative session dies and would then need to be reintroduced. So I think the live question is, do we go through the effort to reintroduce that bill? And I'm not sure that we should, because it takes a lot of work. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of work to it, a lot of cultivation of the legislators to sponsor it, a lot of education work of all the other legislatures. You got to go to the committee hearings. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of. I live an hour from Augusta, so we don't even know what a legislative session is going to look like. So for all those reasons, and the state is like $1.5 billion like in the hole right now because of COVID-related debt. So not the best environment for it. But I'm forever hopeful, and if I see an opportunity, I will charge at it. But right at the moment, I'm a little skeptical. I think what could be done, perhaps, I don't have the answer to this, but what could be proposed, if there's something that doesn't cost money, that could open something up to cooperative, like if there's something that we could do that would improve access to capital for cooperatives, or it's got to not cost money, and it's got to be presented, it's got to be messaged as like COVID response. Like that's just the reality of where the legislature's head is going to be based. It's got to be COVID response, and it can't cost money, or it's got to save money, because there will be cuts. So just going back to the Fred and Maureen and Chris, starting with that, I mean, I'm curious for more feedback on what people learned from them that they didn't know before. Do people feel more capable of approaching a reporter? Did that seem like a crazy thing that you'd never dared do before, but now you do? I'd like some feedback from folks on like how helpful that was for them, and again, in a practical way.
I found it really helpful, particularly because, as many of you know, I'm very new to the cooperative world, and the most interaction I've had with reporters are at demonstrations and protests and stuff like that, which is a very different environment. It's a lot more sort of on the fly, like tell us what you think really suddenly, as opposed to sort of ways to pitch and create relationships with journalists. So I felt that was really helpful and really humanized sort of the journalistic relationship between what we do and what they do.
Yeah. Great.
I would echo that. That caused a change in my thinking, which I'm really thankful for. Instead of being sort of the representative of an organization contacting a news organization, now this is me as a person contacting a reporter, and focusing on the relationship. And it's not. And I remember which one of them said, "Don't send your email to the general info at." Find a person, study, their writing style, and approach them directly. Sort of, one professional to another. That was not how I've approached this in the past, and I'm just very thankful to get that opinion.
Yeah, what are some others' thoughts about like what you learned from Fred and Maureen and Chris, and how has it impacted your willingness or your thoughts about like engaging, like trying to engage the media to promote your co-op or to promote your cause or promote your work generally?
I think one thing that Chris really brought up, and I think Fred to an extent too, is thinking about it from the journalist perspective. Like, what's the angle here? They're not just going to do some kind of feel-good thing to promote something. They're looking at some kind of angle that's different, that's going to kind of go against conventional wisdom, or something novel, or a different angle about your project that maybe other people haven't thought. So it sounds like in some cases they've been pitched to in one vein, but they end up seeing something else and something more interesting that would make more of a kind of engaging story. So they're just trying to like step back and look at things from a distance and seeing like what might intrigue them about maybe it's just a small part of what we're doing that might get their interest, as opposed to a bigger feel-good kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I heard from all three of them that I think is a good lesson for us to remember, like if we're sometimes in a bubble of thinking how awesome cooperatives are, and like there's a cooperative that can solve every problem on the planet, and like that's not how they're going to approach the story, no matter how hard you try, right? And they all made that clear. They're like, the story is like the counter narrative of a scrappy 2-person startup in the middle of a pandemic, not that they're a cooperative. The cooperative becomes part of the story because they are, but that's not the story, right? Or like they said that in a number of times, like the story is the people, the impact on people, the impact on communities, and then the cooperative becomes part of that. So I think that's a good lesson to take away. If you're insisting that the story is about the cooperative, you might not get their attempt. What are some other thoughts? Jared, narrative about the early co-op development is ongoing. Interesting to get that story. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Any other thoughts from folks about what they learned today and how they think they can apply it to get some media attention for what they do?
One thing that came out in the some of the breakout discussion that we were having was the way in which we're trying to get coverage captured for some of these cooperative narratives. If you back up to the macro level, you might be able to see bigger narratives in there that make the story more compelling. So rather than one cooperative success, you know, the components of a newer cooperative ecosystem coming together, you know, and ways of capturing not just sort of the micro snapshots of that, but also the broader story of what it means when multiple sectors start working together. That's, you know, we've been talking about that for a long time, but that is a little bit of a newer narrative in the broader world. And there's some interest in that, in seeing different parts come together in a way. I found that came out in some of our discussions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes to the fact, I mean, it's kind of the point I was making, like, we want to tell a story about a co-op. There's always got to be like some meta story above that to get them involved, right? Like the loggers co-op thing there was no story there until it was like put in the context of like the forestry industry in crisis, and like, right, it was a response to that, and then it was a story. A lot of the rock stories, the resident cooperative stories, and the cooperative housing story in Portland, the storyline is affordable housing. People, middle class is priced, and working class, to say the least, are priced out of Portland, and this is a response, right? So, like, cooperatives as a response to a commonly recognized thing, access to healthy food. Like, that's the food co-op's niche. Any final thoughts? We're at 3:48. We've got time for another comment or two if you've got them, or we can move along.
I thought it was interesting to learn and to understand that the reporters really want to write their own story. I feel like a lot of the time when I approach media outlets, I feel like I need to have a complete story to give them, to save them time, that they can, and you know, so understanding that, giving them the headline, being very clear about who it's about and what the story is, and then leaving the story up to them to write. I thought that was a really good eye-opener, and leaving sort of the longer pieces for maybe your op-eds or letter to the editor.
Yeah. Yeah, Fred's been very clear on that. He wants no detail. Yeah. And he said it again today. It's like, I'm a writer. That's what I like to do. It's what I get paid for. Let me write the story. Don't write my story for me. They all said that. Yeah. So. Well, thank you all. I hope this was helpful to all of you. We can talk, Emmy, Doug, myself, and others, John on the steering committee can talk about ways that, you know, we can practically offer some assistance along these lines to members of Cooperative Maine Business Alliance and cooperatives generally in Maine. And
you have about 5 more minutes or so if there are more.
Were there closing things that you wanted to do? I thought it was 3:50. Okay, yeah, we got a few more. So are there other ideas that people had? I'll throw one out. If anybody wants to think about it for a second. Arthur was pitching, this is an example I thought that was perfect of you not even recognizing what the story is. Like, you're pitching one thing and the reporter's like, wait a second, that's not the story, this is the story. Arthur was pitching Fred, I was in the small group, about like the unbanked and how many millions of people just don't have a basic banking access. And it was all data driven, it was very abstract. And of course it's a bad problem, but Fred was just like, but who? I need a person. I need, like, show me somebody who's unbanked. And What I didn't have the opportunity to tell Fred, Arthur, and what he was starting to pick up on is that like the community that you're working with is the actual story. So you've got to have some people that you're talking about that demonstrate the data, the human side of the data. And then the fact of your own background, I think reinforces, like you've done finance work and microcredit, microfinance all over the world for governments, for the UN. And like now you're doing it here in Maine. And so like, I think Fred was coming close to seeing that as the story, right? That's a crazy path. That's a profile right there. And the work that you're doing here. So you were pushing one storyline and Fred was trying to hone in on, but wait a second, what are you doing? Who are you?
Yeah. I think a story can bring stories. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
Like once you start telling a story, sometimes there is a story behind the story, and but I liked also the way he was picking on that one to say, be more concrete, like tell me a specific group, how they have benefited, what they have done. Some stories want to have be like data based or like facts based, basically. I don't know the right word to use. That's what I understood. Like he wanted to be more specific, not like a generic situation. Who is the beneficiary? How has he, benefited from what? So yeah. Which, as you said, I think. Yeah, I'm checking on the time. As you said, I think the impact can be tangible or can be perceived, right? You can start to perceive the impact even before you touch it or before you leave it. So, yeah.
I also feel like this goes back, and multiple of the folks today reiterated this, that the relationship building, like it shouldn't just be the moment when you have the one particular story, but working to build relationships with those contacts in the media allows for conversations that might help unearth different stories, right? As part of what Arthur and Rob are talking about in this version, but that the relationship building can actually help maybe capture stories you don't even necessarily realize are there, or that you can have an explorative conversation because you've built relationship with some of those contacts, and that's really valuable over time.
And Rob, I found it interesting that what I was relating about a particular co-op, what I thought was interesting and exciting, it turned out that what I said at the very end was what interested and excited, was interesting and exciting to a reporter. So that was very instructive.
Yep. And that's Fred actually in our small group made the point. He was kicking himself for not making it a forceful point to everyone that don't only get in touch with a reporter when you want them to do a story for you. Develop a relationship. There's a bunch of reporters in Maine, the editorial page editor for the BDN, there's a bunch of news reporters that I just say, how's it going? Check out this study that just came out. I just send them information and they remember that. And then when you go to them and say, number one, if they have a story, they know something about stuff and they will call you and get you as a source. Or then when the time comes that you actually do want them to do a story on something that you're working on or your co-op, you've educated them and they look through stuff, or they at least bookmark it, and they'll go back to it. So, that was an important point of Fred's. It's like, don't be shy about just sending them an email saying, check out this thing that happened around like SNAP benefits for food co-ops, or check out this new study about like employee-owned businesses, or whatever it is. They appreciate it. They don't view it as a nuisance. And it, in fact, butters them up, basically, for when you do want them to do a story. So that was a point that Fred wanted to make and forgot to make it in the big group. So thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Emmy to close us out, and here on Friday afternoon at 3:55.
Thank you all so much for being here and for participating all the way through this conference. As we said in the beginning of all of this, we have had so many back-to-back conferences overlapping, rescheduled from, scattered throughout the year. And it's really special to have you all here. We will provide a recording of all of our sessions. So even if you didn't make it to one of them, you will have access to all of the content. And I just want to thank all of the great presenters that we've had. They have provided such knowledge and great resources for us to take with us into our co-ops and our development work. And I would really like it if all of you could take this last end of conference poll before we leave. So I'm going to have Catherine put that up on the screen. And then I wish you all a very happy weekend. And again, thank you all for your participation. I think this conference has been very interactive, which is a really big, reason for why we are doing this, networking, collaborating, and figuring things out together. So thank you all so very, very much, and have a great weekend.